This is the movie I rented from Netflix just before sending it back to get The Ghost in the Darkness, which is one of my favorite horror movies of all time. And I did the review of that one first because I have more I want to say about that movie. So I wanted to get my core review out quickly so I could do research on the historical events of the Salvo Man-Eaters, and the part that interests me most of all, which is the ecology of the time and place that movie, which is loosely based on a true story, was set. It'll take me some time to do that. In the meantime, let's talk about The Witch, the 2015 movie. I've been reading a few of the reviews of this on Netflix. I wrote a simple one myself, and I like to read others because it's interesting to see how different people view it and what they have to say about it. Now, as I've mentioned before, and if you're new to my channel, I'll just let you know right now, I'm an atheist. So I don't look at this movie from a religious point of view of any kind. I just watch the story play out. It was an interesting choice in the writing of this film to establish early on that there is in fact a witch in the woods. And because we're aware of that, it's not simply the fear of being alone in the woods to fend for themselves, the strain of being without a larger community and struggling through hard times that leads them to either retreat or hold on tighter to their religion, the fear of the unknown that leads to the main family's belief in a witch, which is the perspective you'd kind of expect going into this movie, unless it was going to go for an all-out fun story like Hocus Pocus. I think Hocus Pocus is actually a good movie. The Witches is also good. Hocus Pocus is more fun. And it's especially hilarious in the Looney Tunes episode where Bugs Bunny uses the magical words against Count Bloodcount. Abracadabra, Hocus Pocus. Transylvania 5000 is the title of that episode. That's a weird title. Oh, and you should go watch Bugs Bunny vs. Witch Hazel cartoons. Witch Hazel is just hysterical. If there were witches hiding in the woods, you'd want them to be like Witch Hazel. They wouldn't be that hard to outwit, and they'd be so much fun just to have a cup of tea with, or hot chocolate. I prefer hot chocolate. It's just, most years in the temperate forest biome, it's usually not quite cold enough yet on Halloween night for hot chocolate, though there have been a few cold years. I'm going off on tangents again, aren't I? So anyway, in this movie, there are a couple things to understand. The first is, it's not, at least the way I see it, it's not really a story that's about witches. What it's really about is the psychological degradation, the mental erosion of the family. Now, I don't remember it being distinctly said at the beginning of the movie, but it begins with a Puritan family being banished over disputes they had with the local community over, I guess, interpretations of the New Testament of the Bible. I don't remember actually anyone saying that in the movie. I had to read about that. Anyway, being an atheist, I don't really pay attention to any religious text in the world, although I can still enjoy stories that come from a religious perspective if they are accessible to a wide enough group and told well. Doesn't mean I actually believe it's how history played out, or it's how I view the world. And only means I can enjoy stories based on religion and superstition. Doesn't mean I always will. Now, the Christian view on witches, being those who make a deal with Satan for their powers, is just one take. The very earliest incarnations of the kinds of figures in multiple cultures over the world and over time that would come to be called witches or sorcerers, or other names, were almost without doubt the clans when humans back in when everyone was in these clan tribal groups spreading out over the earth. Wise men and women, because witch and wizard both spun out of ancient words that just meant wise. A mage comes from the word magic. I don't know when or where the word magic originated. In Japanese, the word is maho, with an H, which is why magical girls are known as maho shoujo. Magical girls are really an entire different genre. So this Christian version, this Puritan version, is just one version of what a witch is. And male witches do exist in folklore. The word for male witch is usually warlock instead of wizard, as warlock is more often associated with the dark side. I think it comes from a term that meant oath breaker. Whereas wizards are, wise men and women through study, can be good or evil. It all has to do with choice and where their paths lead them. Nowadays, the words are so interchanged so much, and every work of fiction and fantasy has its own versions. Every writer has their own unique take on magic users. So this movie was written and directed by Robert Eggers, who had a lifelong fascination with witches. I don't know if this means just the Christian interpretation, or if he looks at others, too. Clearly not for this movie, but that's okay. This movie is supposed to take a look at the New England 17th century Puritan beliefs and superstitions. It's meant to be that. And it does it very well. It is scary. You can tell that the father, who is a very likable character, as is the whole family, with maybe the exception of the mother. I care for her least, but you can definitely see why the family collapses as it does. Because in this version of 17th century New England, the dark forces are very much real. Not to mention, this is also... you can also see this happening in a family that is just lost and isolated from society. The father is trying his absolute hardest to keep his family alive, safe, and sane. But ultimately, the isolation, the fear, the strain of having to fend for themselves against an unforgiving world, especially with the witch and the devil against them, all proves to be too much in the end. It's actually quite sad when you look at it that way. This movie is not as dark, either in the lighting or in tone, as I thought it'd be, but it does live up to the good things I heard about it. It's a slow-paced story, but it's short. It's only around an hour and a half in length, and I think that really does rescue it from the fate that so many horror movies fall to, which is dragging. This movie does not drag, but if it had stretched out even another 10 minutes, I think it would have started to.